Hey everyone, it's Ornlu, and it's time for part 4 of State of the Civs 2024. So for those who have not seen the previous segments, State of the Civs is a short series I do around the start of a new year, where I take a holistic look at all of the civilizations in AoE2 right now, assessing not just how balanced they are, but also how cohesive is their design. Basically, do these civs feel like a natural part of the AoE2 roster? Are they unique? Do they have situations where they shine and situations where they struggle? Do their bonuses feel gimmicky or out of place? That sort of thing. In an attempt to quantify these fairly nebulous concepts, as well as to keep track of all of the civs in the game, we're going to place everybody on a modified tier list. I explained what I mean by the different tiers in the first part, so be sure to check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Of course, this is episode 4, and since we're going in alphabetical order, today we will be assessing the Magyars, Malay, Malians, Mayans, Mongols, Persians, Poles, Portuguese, and Romans. Lastly, if you guys are excited for this breakdown, be sure to leave a like on the video, comment as to what you think of the civs we cover, and subscribe to the channel for tons more AoE2 content. Alright, plenty to cover, so let's get into it. Kicking things off is going to be the ever-popular Magyars. This cavalry civilization hails from the Forgotten expansion, and I remember way back when people first started playing these guys in multiplayer, players took to Magyars more than the other Forgotten civs. The core reason for this is going to be the aggressive cavalry nature of the Magyars. This civ hits you hard and fast and never lets up throughout the game. Basically, it's the closest you can get to playing Huns without playing Huns. That said, the Magyar playstyle is a bit different. The cheaper scouts and free melee attack upgrades does give the civ a deadly scout rush, but if you do basically anything else except a men-at-arm rush, Magyars will feel quite generic. Still, their scout rush is one of the best in the game, and the persistent scout discount means Magyars can feel just as comfortable spamming scouts in late feudal as in early feudal. You really want to get damage done early with this civ, because the complete lack of eco bonus means you can easily fall behind civilizations with better economies in the mid-game. In Castle Age, cheaper scouts can still be useful, and the free attack upgrades mean you can get fully upgraded knights quite quickly. Furthermore, faster training cav archers really eases the transition into that unit, and it's going to be one of the most important tools the civ has going into the late game. Speaking of which, after a lackluster early Imperial Age, the Magyar post-Imperial Age is one of the very best in AoE2. Cav archers with extra attack and range can be almost impossible to kill, and fully upgraded Magyar hussars, as in their unique unit, are such efficient trash units that they are perhaps the best meat shield in the game. So last year I ended up placing Magyars in the something is off tier, but added the caveat that it was more something is missing. Although the strong start and deadly late game felt quite interesting, creating the dynamic of the aggressive European civilization that still maintained some of its roots as steppe nomads, Magyars still fell flat in all but the most aggressive settings. They simply didn't have enough past their early start, with specifically a scout rush, that most other civs outshone them. However, Magyars received a few important changes in 2023. For starters, Magyar hussars had their cost rebalanced to be more gold heavy before Corvinian army, which actually makes them more affordable in the mid-game when that resource is plentiful. This was nice, but the big buff was changing their fairly underwhelming team bonus of foot archers gaining +2 line of sights to cav archers training 25% faster. That change was huge, and as like I said, it allows Magyars to much more easily transition to their power unit. The subsequent surge in popularity of the Magyars backs up the idea that this change is working out quite well, and it will be enough for me to put them in the complete tier for 2024. It's crazy what the difference some seemingly small adjustments can make, but Magyars really feel like a strong but balanced civ in the current metagame. They still shine the most on hyper-aggressive maps, but the civ remains viable on even more standard maps like Arabia. My only concern is that Magyars could feel like a bit of a better version of the Huns right now, so it's still possible there could be a few tweaks here and there to the civ, but in a vacuum, Magyars are in a good spot. Taking things in a very different direction, our next civilization is going to be the Malay! This Rise of the Raja civilization is the only one in the game to solely have the naval designation by the tech tree, but as we will see, they also do economy and infantry very well. By far, this civ's most notable bonus is their 66% faster age up. At first, it may not be clear as to what exactly this does for you, but in practice, Malay will get 2 villagers worth of extra saved TC time when going to feudal age, and another 3 on the way to castle age. This means Malay will typically click up later than most civs, but will have a stronger economy when reaching the next stage. With Imperial Age, the bonus is going to mostly be timing based and is very powerful in getting the Malay player a critical tech advantage. However, all of this talk is only about land. On water, Malay still have their age up bonus, but also have the super cheap and long lasting fish traps. As we see fish booming only become more and more popular on tons of different water and hybrid maps, this bonus saves an enormous amount of wood for the Malay player. Still, you have to do something with that economy. Malay have a solid tech tree, with infantry typically being the standout unit class, with the free armor upgrades and spammable Karambit warrior unique unit. Gold intensive units for this civ typically involve monks, bombard cannons, and archers. Another area in which Malay excel is the trash game. In addition to fully upgraded halberdiers and skirmishers, Malay have access to gold-free two-handed swordsmen with the forced levy unique tech, which can be invaluable in grindy games. Of course, Malay still have their critical weakness of awful cavalry cavalry with the exception of cheap elephants, making the Civs armies quite slower than average. So all of this creates a really cohesive and fun identity for the Malay, and I ended up placing them in the almost there tier in 2023. Malay were powerful on water maps and closed maps, and represented a solid flank in team games. Open maps were their worst settings, but they were far from hopeless on Arabia. My only complaint with the Civ was that harbors felt too weak, but necessarily so as the building had no stone cost. So guess what the major change to this Civ was in the past year? To give Malay free infantry armor upgrades. Ugh. Honestly, this change is probably too strong, and another example of adding power creep. Malay infantry in the early to mid game are much stronger now, and especially that karambit switch versus skirm heavy armies is almost instant. A transition into halbs in the early Imperial Age is also way too easy. I honestly think that this change was completely unnecessary. Well, we have to give these guys a rank for 2024, and I still think the Civ is almost there. My issues with harbors remain, and is joined by my dislike of the free armor upgrades, and yet Malay remain a compelling Civ. They aren't overpowered on any one map type, although they do feel really good on anything other than open maps. The Civ just has such a strong economy combined with a good tech tree. At least in my humble view, the way to proceed with Malay is relatively clear, so I don't think I need to drop them down a tier, but I have to admit I have more question marks about this Civ in 2024 than I did in 2023. For our third Civ and continent of the day, we move to the Malians. This infantry civilization was released as part of the African kingdoms and is certainly one of the most popular in tournament play. The reason for this is clear once you look at their early game. Two solid economy bonuses with the cheaper wood cost for their buildings and the more efficient gold miners allow Malians to do basically anything on open or hybrid maps. The extra pierce armor for infantry is also helpful when going for any sort of drush or men-at-arms rush. This carries quite nicely into the mid-game, where their eco bonuses are still useful, and the Civ possesses the single broadest mid-game tech tree in AoE2. Effectively having more wood and gold than average really smooths any and all unit transitions throughout the game, and Malians are one of the best options out there when it comes to double gold army compositions. That said, Imperial Age is really where the Civ famously struggles. No bracer, halberdier, or blast furnace can really limit your options in early imp, and although you are good at unit transitions, you still need to actually make one if your mid-game involves archers. You still have strong range support options in the late game, it just comes in the form of their Gebetto unique unit, which has really seen a surge in popularity in 2023. Gebettos, when protected by cavalry or high pierce armor champions, create a deadly army composition, both in terms of raw strength and cost efficiency. So last year I placed Malians in the almost there tier, as the Civ was good, but struggled to distinguish itself outside of nomad maps, where you could immediately build a fishing ship due to the early wood savings. In many ways, the Civ felt power crept in a lot of settings. But hey, guess what? Malians got some compensating bonuses in 2023. Gebetto hit points were buffed by 5, Tigui gave TCs more arrows, and most importantly, the longer lasting gold miner bonus was changed to gold miners being more efficient. This is essentially a combination bonus of faster working, extra carry capacity, and longer lasting gold miners. The initial value to this bonus was 15% more efficient miners, but was later on toned down to just 10%. Nowadays, in early February of 2024, Malians still feel like they belong in the almost there tier, but for the exact opposite reason as to last year. Instead of feeling slightly power crept, Malians now feel like slight power creepers, as they are just too good on so many map types, especially hybrid maps. The double eco bonus and broad tech tree are a devastating combo, and the Gebetto is just such a popular unit. The unit may need to lose one of the buffs it got in the last couple years. I don't think Malians are too overpowered or anything like that, but they could use just a small nerf to bring them back in line to the other Civs. Another Civ, another continent, as we now move to our final American Civ, the Mayans. This archer civilization was released as part of the Conqueror's expansion, just like their Meso-twin, the Aztecs. Ever since, Mayans have been one of the most powerful and popular civilizations in the history of AoE2, always on the back of smooth, efficient, and aggressive gameplay. First and foremost, Mayans have one of the best Dark Ages of any Civ, thanks to starting with an extra villager and longer lasting resources. The extra villager does come at the cost of 50 food, and since you begin housed on most settings, you need to research Loom right away. Still, it is an overall boost to your economy, and Mayans should reliably be a villager ahead of their opponent once Feudal Age comes in. Still, the longer lasting resources are the star of the show here, as especially extra food from sheep, boar, deer, and forage bushes all help the Mayans player make that transition into Feudal Age farming more smoothly, even if they open with a drush or men-at-arms rush. From here, the civilization is all about efficiency at the cost of flexibility. Mayans have what I would argue to be the least flexible tech tree of the American Civs, but the Archer discount and Eldorado unique tech for their Eagle Warriors means that this doesn't usually matter. Crossbowmen can be massed easily by Mayans, and the Plumed Archer unique unit represents some good long-term value. Even their trash is not bad, featuring Holche Javelineer skirmishers that fire an extra projectile on top of fully upgraded halbs. Where Mayans tend to struggle is when population efficiency matters, as none of the Mayan units are particularly strong pound for pound. Plumes and Eldorado Eagles are your best bet here, but it's no secret that the Civ struggles really hard against the champion plus onager army composition, as well as units like the Gulam and Huskarl. For those reasons, Mayans are not a particularly strong choice on closed maps these days, even though they remain a powerful pick on open maps. So last year Ornlu was actually happy with the spot of Mayans in the metagame and placed them in the complete tier. Yes, they are good on open maps, but especially with the power level of Civs in recent years, it's far from overbearing. Mayans are actually one of the most stable Civs balance-wise, getting only a bug fix in 2022 and then 0 direct changes in 2023. In fact, with the rise of the Incas, who do basically everything that Mayans do but better, this past year was probably the worst year for Mayans since their introduction. That's crazy to think about. Nevertheless, I am going to keep Mayans in the complete tier for 2024. Yes, they have been power crept by Incas right now, but Mayans are still strong enough to hold their own versus most Civs on most map types. The Civ still does everything well it always has, it just has more competition in the current meta than it's had in years past, which is basically what I look for in Civ balance. Our next Civ is going to be my all-time favorite, the Mongols. This Age of Kings cavalry archer civilization is the original steppe nomad Civ, and the first to really lean into the light cavalry plus cav archer archetype. This Civ is famous for two things, arguably the fastest start of any Civ in the game, as well as one of the best late games of any Civ in the game. Mongols are all about hitting you hard and fast, and using that early advantage to develop towards a nigh unstoppable Imperial Age. In the Dark Age, the extra line of sight for scouts gives the Civ a huge leg up in finding early resources, especially huntables, which is important for their other early game bonus of hunters working 40% faster. Mongols can get a faster feudal age time than almost any other Civ, and they really want to get damage done early. This is because after their quick start, Mongols have no economy bonus, as well as a tech tree that features plenty of holes. Still, the faster firing cav archers and extra HP light cav and steppe lancers can go a long way in helping the Mongol player survive into the late game. Once Imperial Age comes in, it is all about the Mangudai unique unit, tanky hussars, and speedy siege. I don't think I need to explain in detail as to why the Mongols have a terrifying late game army. Still, last year I only placed Mongols in the almost there tier. Basically, this was just because the Mongol Castle Age unique tech Nomads was one of the very worst in the game. As other Civs have had their underwhelming unique techs replaced or reworked, Nomads really stands out like a sore thumb. Nevertheless, the rest of the Civ was totally there, iconic, possessing very noticeable strengths and weaknesses, and were just one of the most fun to play. So, just like Mayans, Mongols were one of the very few Civs to receive no direct changes in all of 2023, and indeed I am going to be keeping them in the almost there tier. My gripes with the Nomad tech remain, but I do need to add a further concern, the Steppe Lancer. This unit has become something of a menace with Mongols in particular, and that 30% extra HP can be difficult to stop in early Castle Age. Thankfully, at least in my eyes, the solution to this problem is quite straightforward. Just replace Nomads with another unique tech that gives Steppe Lancers that extra HP, removing that from the Civ bonus. Boom! 2 problems solved at once. It also adds to the flavor of all 3 Steppe Lancer Civs possessing no direct bonus to that unit, but instead buffing them with their respective Castle Age unique techs. Once those issues get sorted, I think Mongols will be in a great spot. Oh boy, it's time to turn to the most reworked civilization in all of 2023, the Persians. This may be the Age of Kings classic cavalry civilization, but these guys got a brand new shine in their rework this past year, but more on that in a bit. Gameplay-wise, Persians are the cavalry civilization most focused on economy and variety. Civs like Franks and Teutons focus on heavy cavalry, Saracens and Gujaras prioritize camels, and the steppe Civs like their light cavalry. Persians do all of these things at least pretty well, and further possess the single most powerful and expensive non-siege unit, the War Elephant. Still, you need to actually get to your expensive cavalry, and that's where the Persian economy comes in. The extra starting food and wood, as well as the progressively faster working town centers and docks, give the Civ one of the most consistent economies in the game, particularly on hybrid maps where they can get an early fishing ship. Generally, the Persians player wants to keep their economy humming as much as possible to allow them to build up to their strong cavalry options, as well as a nice support core of gunpowder, siege rams, and halbs, or even possibly trash crossbowmen. Of course, Persians have some noticeable weaknesses in lack of good monks, somewhat generic military units, as in lacking direct bonuses, as well as missing the critical bracer technology. For those reasons, Persians were largely outshone by all of the other cavalry civilizations in 2023, and is why I placed them in the somewhat problematic tier. Persians felt a bit boring and weak in 2023, and oh man did the devs try and address that. With the release of the Mountain Royals DLC, Persians got a rework to the degree that we've only really seen with Indians to Hindustanis. Their economy bonuses remained largely the same, but importantly got back the faster working TCs and docks in the Dark Age the Civ had at DE's launch. The military side of things is where the major changes happened. The Civ got an entirely new unique unit, the Savar, which replaced the Paladin upgrade. Savars have a bit less HP than Paladins, but more armor and some extra bonus damage versus archers. Also, and this is just as important, they look really cool. On top of that, the War Elephant got a facelift with a movement speed buff and a massive increase to their anti-building bonus damage. War Elephants are still expensive, slow behemoths, but now they really feel worth their cost cost if you can get there. Even Mahouts was replaced with a more interesting unique tech Citadels, which gives the Persian castle some extra powerful defenses. Finally, the Persians were rounded out by enabling Parthian tactics in the Castle Age, as well as the Caravanserai in the Imperial Age for team games. So with all of those changes, where do Persians stand now? Well, they were definitely overtuned at the launch of the Mountain Royals, but I think the Civ is probably in a pretty good spot, and I will be putting them in the complete tier for 2024. The removal of the gold generating cavalry bonus was quite important, and reducing the Savar bonus damage so they don't two-shot arbalests also felt appropriate. Persians are strongest on hybrid maps and as a team game pocket, but they are at least viable on both open and closed maps. Some more playtesting would make me feel a bit more confident in this placement, but I think Persians have gotten to where they need to be. Entering the final third of the video, we now go back to Europe with the Poles. This cavalry civilization was added with Dawn of the Dukes and is very distinct with their massive focus on economy and cost efficiency. Economy in particular is something you need to pay close attention to with this Civ because their Folvark unique building gives Poles a unique farming setup. Basically, when you place a farm adjacent to the Folvark, 8% of its maximum food will be immediately placed into your stockpile. In practice, Poles have a ridiculously good farming economy, and that is only supplemented by their stone miners generating 1 gold for every 3 stone mined. In addition to more resources coming in, Poles also have fewer resources going out, especially as their heavy cavalry have a 60% discount with the Szlachta Privileges unique tech. On top of Cavalier spam, Polish winged hussars are one of the very best trash units in the game. The armor shredding Obuk is an incredibly tanky and cost-efficient infantry unit, and you just also happen to have arbalests, bombard cannons, siege rams, and decent monks. Once this Civ gets going, it has very few weaknesses. Of course, it can be rather tricky to get to your unit spam with the Poles, as their 2 eco bonuses take a while to really get going, and it can be difficult to protect your Folvark farmers early on. This gives Poles the general distinction of being incredibly powerful on more closed maps, but rather lackluster on open maps. This awkward dynamic is why I placed Poles in the somewhat problematic tier last year. I stand by saying that Poles are one of the single least fun civilizations to face in AoE2 on anything resembling a closed map. They just have too strong of an economy and way too many unit options. Still, Poles got 2 major changes last year, one in the very first patch of 2023 and another in the last patch. First, the Pole eco did take a hit when the food instantly generated by Folvarki was reduced from 10% to 8%. Although helping with the Civ's balance, all it really accomplished was to kill any potential the Civ had on open maps, and they were still pretty much just as powerful on closed maps. Therefore, way later on, the devs decided to reduce the cost of the Folvark to 100 wood, giving it the same price as a mill. This helps a bit on open maps, but with so many Civs in AoE2, you still really don't want to be playing Poles there. Also, Poles got the small adjustment of removing their Dark Age villager HP regeneration, basically taking away any advantage the Civ had in Vil fighting. Still, the dynamics of this civilization remain basically unchanged over the past year, and I will be keeping Poles in the somewhat problematic tier for 2024. The theme of the strong economy with cheap armies is totally there, but this Civ just has too many options. In particular, Arbalest plus Winged Hussar feels like an army combo that is just too powerful and efficient, and I wouldn't hate to see the Poles lose Arbalest to have them focus more on their melee units. We'll have to see what the changes are to Poles going forward, but they need to feel less oppressive in the later stages of the game. The second to last Civ of the day will be one of my favorites to complain about, the Portuguese. A well-known civilization from the kingdoms of Africa, the Portuguese focus on navy and gunpowder according to the tech tree, and although the Civ does both of those things quite well, that's only the beginning. Portuguese are all about versatility, technology, and powerful gunpowder. Their only bonus at the start of games is that their foragers generate wood, which gives you an extra 250 wood by the time you complete your berries on standard settings. This is a decent bonus, but more importantly, it ties you over until the main Civ bonus kicks in, all units costing minus 20% gold. That, combined with faster researching technologies, allows Portuguese to be one of the very best civilizations in going for double gold army compositions. In Feudal Age, that mostly just means cheaper archers, but in Castle Age, crossbowmen, knights, monks, and siege all benefit from this discount. On top of that, the organ gun unique unit can blast away at grouped up units, and although not the building killer they used to be, our Portuguese unique unit still nicely rounds out the Civ's military options. In the Imperial Age, Portuguese can go for fully upgraded cavalier, arbalests, hand cannons that can be more accurate, monks, organ guns, the list goes on. The gold discount gives your expensive units more mileage as gold starts to run low, and even if it does start to go dry completely, the Fedoria unique building can slowly generate all resources for you. It's somewhere around here that I would normally talk about the downsides to a civilization, but there aren't really any for the Portuguese. Yes, there are civilizations with better economies, and Civs like Bohemians can outmuscle Portuguese on closed maps, but really these cases are few and far between. Even on water, Portuguese remain a top pick. And that brings us to the issues with Portuguese. Last year, the Forage Bush bonus had just been introduced, and already people were realizing that a smooth early game was all the Civ was lacking. Portuguese Portuguese became more popular on many different map types, and I placed the Civ in the major changes needed tier. Top 5 on Arabia, Arena, and Water is not exactly something that screams well balanced, but beyond that, the Civ just does too many things well. Still, the most gimmicky aspects of the Civ were the organ gun all-ins on closed maps and Nomad, as well as the Faderia in low eco situations. And to their credit, the devs did address those issues in some 2023 balance changes. Faderias became more expensive, and the organ guns were completely reworked to better emphasize the multi-pellet nature of their attacks. Basically, they're worse against buildings and cavalry, but much better against infantry and archers. However, Portuguese remain in a tough spot for 2024, and I'm going to keep them in the major changes needed tier. I will say that organ guns are at least more interesting than they were before, but the Civ still has some of the most off balance in the game. Note, do everything better than most Civs in most settings is not a good Civ identity. They aren't game-breakingly strong on any one map type, but the fact that they're among the very best Civs in basically every game mode is a big red flag, so to say. There is definitely some more iterating that needs to happen here. Oh boy, we get to end today with the not at all controversial Romans. Our last new Civ from 2023, this infantry civilization was the only AoE2 addition from the Return of Rome DLC, and it immediately caused controversy. Arguments whether or not the Roman civilization even belongs in AoE2 aside, Romans weren't even included in ranked multiplayer right away. It seems that, at least initially, the devs wanted to treat Romans like an Easter egg that you could play with your friends in custom games, but still, they are a fully fledged Civ in the game, and people wanted to see them in ranked and in tournaments, so eventually the devs relented. As for how the Romans play out, this Civ is all about a strong economy and powerful individual units. Their one eco bonus is about the most generally applicable bonus possible. Your villagers do everything 5% better. All resource collection, building, and repairing. This is just a good bonus that helps you in every possible strategy. Going to their army, Romans are especially distinct in the early game with their infantry blacksmith defense upgrades applying twice, meaning you can get +2/+2 on your feudal age men-at-arms and spearmen. After that, however, Romans are fairly generic. Mediocre archers, good infantry if not expensive due to missing supplies, solid cavalry, and average monks. The one shining point in the mid-game is their scorpions, which are very cheap, can track targets with ballistics, and even fire faster. In the late game, Romans have their legionary champion replacement, which are a bit better versus other infantry, as well as their centurion unique unit. This is basically a very expensive and powerful heavy cavalry that buffs the attack and movement speed of nearby swordsmen. Now, as a new Civ, we don't have a point of reference from last year, but I'm gonna be honest, I really don't like much about the civilization on so many levels, and I'm gonna put them in the major changes needed tier. Okay, where to begin? I guess above all else, this Civ is just boring. Their eco bonus is good, but doesn't exactly feel exciting, and most everything you do as the Romans is generic. Other than the extra armor infantry rush, in most high-level games, Romans just spam knights and light cav for the entirety of mid to late game, maybe with some halbs mixed in. Legionaries are expensive to get going, and although solid, missing supplies is a big issue for a unit that still gets massacred by anti-infantry units. The Centurion is even worse. It's simply not practical in really any game to go for Centurions and Legionaries at the same time. It's too expensive and dies to too much. The Comitatense's unique tech just makes your units fly out of their production buildings, which I guess is okay, but it also adds a random charge attack to swordsmen, centurions, and knights. I have no idea why it does this. I don't like charged attacks in general in AoE2, but at least they feel more interesting with the Custier and Arumi. But because it benefits Cavalier, that's seriously all we see from Romans in high-level play. It's like watching Sicilians post-Hoberk but pre-bonus damage reduction nerf. Scorpions can be fun to play around with in the mid-game, but they still die horribly to siege in the late game. And as Romans obviously don't have access to bombard cannons, there isn't much the Civ could do to stop that. I'm sorry I'm being such a downer, guys, but I need to be honest in these videos, and in my opinion, this Civ just doesn't feel like it belongs in AoE2 on any level. I know they're in the major changes needed tier, as it would be pretty rude to add an entire tier of delete this Civ from competitive play, but honestly, I need to see a different look from Romans before I'm even close to satisfied with this Civ. Oof, that was a rough end. But with that, we have completed our 4th of the 2024 Civilization reviews. Only one part left, so be sure to tune in next Monday for the finale. The last 9 Civs are going to be the Saracens, Sicilians, Slavs, Spanish, Tatars, Teutons, Turks, Vietnamese, and Vikings. And of course, be sure to let me know what you think of the Civs we discussed today in the comments. Lastly, I do want to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters, with Anonymous and Gerard in the Great Wolf tier, and then Carolyn, Dieter, Liquid Egg Product, Hryru, and Tanduri in the Dire Wolf tier. If you are interested in supporting my channel further and getting some extra perks, the link for my Patreon is always in the description. But as always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.